To my mind, this is a perfect and fabulous post-lunch session because you cannot possibly feel sleepy when you're in the presence of these four wonderful people. So thank you for being here, and I'm sure this will be wonderful. I just want to say very clearly that we are very interested in questions from the audience. I'm going to set aside about 15 or 20 minutes at the end for questions. So please feel free to get your minds churning, and the four panelists have agreed to answer anything. Right? I just want to mention a couple of things before we begin, that Vivek's debut book, So Now You Know, Growing Up Gay in India, is now available everywhere, and that Aniruddha is working on his second book called Get Out, Your Guide to Coming Out and Going Out. And for those of you who've seen this American film called Get Out, has anyone seen Get Out? Right, so it's not quite as horrific, but yeah, but you got the title from there. Great. So I just have, the panel today is called Being Gay in Right-Wing India, and it has to my mind, two extremely loaded phrases in it. And just to give you a hint, the loaded phrase is not the word in. So I want to think about both those phrases separately and their relationship to each other. So I'm just going to begin by asking each of our panelists what it means to you, the phrase being gay, and what you think it means in India. So if you could speak about yourselves, what that idea of being gay means, what it means to be in India today, we can move on from there. And I think, who wants to begin? Raj, do you want to begin, or you want to? Raga, do you want to begin? Sure, great, thanks.
I normally say gentlemen first, but I'll start.
But they're not gentle.
Yeah. Men though. Okay, so I will answer this as shortly as possible. So when I came out to my mother many years ago, about 15 years ago, so the first thing she said to me, I still remember, she said, "Does it mean that you're now an uncle?" And I couldn't understand that. And ever since, for the last 15 years, I've heard ridiculous conversations around the word gay. People ask me things like, who is the man? They'll ask me, just 2 days ago I got asked, who's the fork and knife? I don't even understand these things. So I stay away from the word gay or any kind of labeling. I don't like that. In fact, my book that is just coming out, which is called Untold Lies, talks about not being labeled at all. So for me, the word gay doesn't work. I am more than a title that the world wants to give me. I am Raga Olga de Silva. I have a beautiful name. I'm a mother of twins. I live in 3 different countries. I run a successful business. And I'm so many more things than just being gay.
Okay.
Sorry. And being gay in India is an adventure. We'll talk about it later.
Absolutely. Vivek, do you want to, or Aniruddha? Yeah.
Honestly speaking, I think my answer might be a lot different than yours. Clearly, I've gone through like years and years and years of bullying at school. So, for being different, for being slightly less masculine, for not that my voice usually sounds like that, but I think also, and we've discussed this multiple times, I think I also come from a lot of privilege, right? Coming out was very easy. My parents were great. My support system of friends was loving. I've never had to deal with like even the slightest bout of homophobia ever since I've come out to people. So when people ask me what being gay is, I say being gay is being, and as I don't know, as superficial as this may sound, and I know it will because as I say it, I know how superficial it sounds. I think being gay is being great. And I know that I can also only say that because of the privilege that I come from, right? Because I've not had to deal with the kind of hardships that a lot of gay men or like queer people have had to deal with. So when I say that I'm gay, and when I'm introducing myself as a gay human being to people, I don't use it as an addendum. I don't use it as something that is supposed to be a part of my identity. I use it as a crown. And this is also because of I mean, I wake up with privilege for breakfast, right? It's that easy. But, which is what when we discuss about what being gay means to people who are not like me, it's not that easy, right? Because I think we've been conditioned in a way to grow up in a society that is so heteronormative that anything that goes beyond the norms of man loving woman, woman loving man back, is treated as something that is alien, is treated as something that is strange, something that is uncanny, something that is to be feared, to be ridiculed, to be mocked, to be made fun of. And which is why I think that there's always like a giant spectrum of people that you'll find, and like each individual's identity and each person's definition of what being gay, or for lack of a better word, right? Because gay is also just like one part of the spectrum. What being queer means to each of them. Because the word queer itself is so queer, right? Like, why would you call it queer? Because queer means strange. And are we strange? Not really. So, that.
Vivek, Raj, who would?
So,
Go ahead.
yeah, so see, I agree with Aniruddha to some extent about the privilege, but I don't, so in my case, I think when I came out, there was a lot of ridicule from family, from friends, there was a lot of bullying, and the usual, like to a psychiatrist's office, and I was shown some paintings to determine whether I'm gay or straight, and I found that ridiculous. Then and even today, I mean, anybody who does that, I find it extremely ridiculous. That why would you do that? I mean, is it cured then? I don't know. Maybe it's not, of course. And what is this cured business anyway? But I think being gay is just how it is. I mean, I don't think twice. I don't have to think about it. So that's, again, privilege, right? I live my life like I would on a day-to-day basis. Yes, I'm very proud of that fact, and it's an identity. But I don't think I need to wear it all the time. And it's there for all to know, and everybody does. And it's all right, it's there. I mean, but it's just that I don't think I need to assert it more than necessary. Maybe that's just my idea of being gay, and it's not nothing to do with the country. I think being gay in India today is way better than being gay in India in the 90s. But that's just my opinion. I think also today with a lot of content, a lot of art that has included and is being inclusive. So like I was discussing with you, right, there are movies that are coming out that have that perspective or have that which wasn't there earlier. Like earlier fire was banned. Today I don't think that would happen. I hope not. So I think being gay in today's India to some extent is also quite liberating, because you can say that. You can express yourself on social media, on platforms which weren't available to me. I was growing up gay in college thinking there's nobody else like me. And I wish I had a friend who would then come out and speak with me about it. But today there are people who speak with each other. There are dialogues, there are conversations. And for that I'm grateful. That this is happening for younger people, and they can discuss and engage.
I'm the oldest here on the panel, and we should try not to be ageist. Now, Vivek, a few things, you mentioned the 90s. When were you born? So you were 3 years in the 90s, 3-year-old.
7 years.
Sorry, 83, so you were 17. But the 90s were not all that bad. Humsafar Trust and Bombay Dost, which Ashok Rao Kavi started in the 1990s. It was the age of activism. My own writing, the film Bomb Gay, Riyad Baudia, who unfortunately passed away in 2003, when he and I met and I showed him my poems, and we made this short experimental 11-minute film called Bomb Gay. That was 1996. One day I locked my flat in Soul City. My first collection of short stories came out in 1995. So I don't think that the 90s were all that bad. I mean, fire was banned, yes, but it was banned by a right-wing organization in Bombay. And later on, it was allowed, the Supreme Court said that it could be shown. So it was not a government ban or anything of the sort. As far as the title is concerned, For me, these terms are political, and I think that's how they should be. It is about the politicization of sexual identity. Now, we have multiple identities, and all of those are politicized. Don't we politicize our gender identity, women? The Dalits politicize their caste identity, and so on. And likewise, gay or queer. And again, with Aniruddha, you said, queer is again a political term. It doesn't just mean weird. It's a term that has been appropriated from its conventional use and has been invested with a kind of new political meaning, a bit like the word black, And queer represents certain things which gay does not. For example, queer represent, one who calls himself queer, as I prefer to do, might not believe in the gender or sexuality binary at all. Or one might want to, now I'm getting a little academic and technical here, but, how do you view normativity? You might want to destabilize normativity, and you're queer in that respect because you don't want to replicate heteronormativity with something else, maybe homonormativity, but you just want to get rid of every possible kind of normativity, and that is queer. So for me, being gay in India, today's India, right-wing India, that's the other thing, that the 90s were different from now, because you will agree that the climate now, the political climate, the way we are being ruled and all, that is a bit different from the 90s. I would say that actually there was a little more, ironically, because 377 was on at that time, and it isn't now on now, since last September. But even so, if films like Bombay could be made, if Humsafar Trust could run an NGO, bring out a newsletter called Bombay Dost, right? It means that things are not all that bad at that point.
I didn't mean it as things were bad. It's just that I also feel the reach today is wider. I mean, people know more to be able to discuss and engage. I thought at that time, because just from a personal experience, I thought it was a very bubble-like experience. I wasn't aware of trusts. I wasn't aware of organizations that I could turn to, or somebody who could help me. Today, I think by the mere virtue of what we have in the form of internet and platforms to discuss and engage, there's a lot more awareness, is what I'm saying.
But you can't pretend that the year 2009 did not exist, the year 2013 did not exist, when when judicial judgments went against us and so on. So you can't, it's not just about social media.
No.
You can't live in an ivory tower.
No, and that's not what I'm doing. I'm not pretending. I'm not living in an ivory tower. I'm sorry, just 1 second. Yeah. All I'm saying is today there is more resources at hand, which weren't even there in 2009.
Equally, there's more risk.
Fair, but I think that was probably
so
there back then as well.
Let me just interrupt, Vivek, because I think this is a very interesting conversation. Because I think maybe what we are debating and what we need to debate, don't switch it off, Aniruddha. What we are debating, I think, is what's the it we're talking about, right? What's the it that was more risky or less risky? What's the it that is more available or less available? And I think maybe what we're talking about, and to my mind, this is where the second half of the title comes in for me about right-wing India, because this very idea of being gay, and let me just sort of throw this out there as a question, as a provocation, responding also to what Raj said quite rightly, I think, is this idea of being gay an assertion of an identity which is very much part of a sort of neoliberal climate of saying, that's the flavor of ice cream I want to buy, right? And sort of saying, that's my flavor and I want to own it. If it is so, what have we gained by that? Ability to buy whatever ice cream we want. And what have we perhaps lost by being able to identify flavors of ice cream? And you can go in any order you'd like.
I don't mind responding to this because, see, I live in India partly. I also have spent a lot of time in New Zealand, where it is a very liberal society, as you know. I do spend a lot of, my home base is London, which is again very different. So there in London, where we live, not that we carry the labels at all, we don't even talk about it, but however, it is so easy for me to just go to a family function or to somebody's house and introduce my partner as my partner, right? In India, for instance, I'm just going to touch upon very normal, everyday things, not about how it impacts me as a person. So in India, in this last 15 years, I have never been invited by even the closest family member with my partner, and my partner has never been introduced as my partner. They are always my best friend or my business partner. I have tried to get a home loan here with a bank, and the bank has rejected me, saying that, sorry, we can't give you a loan for, they just don't, there is no way you get a loan here, right? Then I'll give you an instance. Few years ago, I brought my children from overseas and we stayed in Mumbai and in Delhi. On these school application forms, for instance, which is as simple as just getting admission for your school. If I was married and if I had my husband's name there, it would be fine. But I couldn't put the name of my partner on that form because officially it is not recognized as possible. And those are little things that I'm talking about, everyday existence. How do I manage an everyday life here in India? So all these things, the right-wing India, I want it to impact me on a day-to-day basis. That is when I can hold my head high and say, hey, I am who I am and I'm living a normal life. And I hate the word normal, by the way.
Yeah. Raj, go ahead, yeah, please.
Representation, okay, which is what literature and film is about, representation. Let me draw your attention to the year 2010, when a real-life incident on a university campus. The university in question was Aligarh Muslim University, triggered a film which came out in 2016, based quite faithfully to what really had happened in Aligarh. This professor, right, his privacy was invaded. He was in his own flat on campus, and with the aid of spy cams or whatever, or sting operation or whatever they called it, they found him having inter-class, intergenerational sex with a rickshawala. They hounded him, persecuted him, suspended him, did what they could to make life hell for him. So that at the end, this man was so shamed in the shame culture in which we live. His honor was violated to such an extent that he chose to end his life. Now, ironically, this happened in 2010. In 2009, the Delhi High Court read down 377 and said that it wouldn't apply to consenting adult homosexuals. It made no difference whatsoever to the life of this professor. Another film, I Am, by Aniruddha, shows the same thing. The year is 2009 or 2010, early 2010, when, through a setup, this guy is caught only kissing his partner, his boyfriend, in a car, and he's beaten black and blue. He has to part with 100,000 rupees and so on, and he was trapped in this. So the policeman who caught him, was he aware of the law? Where was all this talk, all the jubilation that 377 has been read down and so on? And immediately after it was read down, it was appealed against, right? So that in 4.5 years, we were back to square one. So what about all that? When you say today's India, if I hear someone like you saying, with no offense meant, with due respect, you're much younger than I am, but if I hear someone like you saying that it's relatively easier today, it horrifies me because it gives me the impression that, as Aniruddha was saying, he's, okay, some of us live in a bubble. We're all privileged. That's why we are here, Otherwise we wouldn't be here, right? I had the same kind of job that the Aligarh professor did. But the same thing didn't happen to me, right? I was open in my department here, right here in this city, Pune University. And they couldn't, some of my students are here, we started a course on LGBT studies. They couldn't do to me what they did to him. So that is privilege. But one can't look at it only from one's own point of view, right?
Do you want to respond, either of you, to that, to my question, to Raj and Olga?
Basically, I forgot what your question was because there was a lot of ice cream in it. But
There was a lot of ice cream.
There was a
On
lot
a
of
hot
ice
day,
cream.
I
On a
thought
hot
it
day, I
would
would
be good.
prefer salted caramel. But I've I don't know. I think I just lost the plot somewhere right
I think
now.
maybe that is what I'm
As
asking
did
for.
everybody else here in the audience because they're all looking extremely clueless. By show of hands, how many of y'all do not know what is happening right now? Right? Great. Okay, wow. Thank you for taking my side. But honestly, I mean, see, the thing is,
If you'd like me to clarify, I'm happy to.
I
But go ahead.
No, I mean, like whatever, when you mention about identity,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I was a very non-bright child growing up until the age of 13, which was when I was 2001. Okay, till the age of 13, till 2001, when the internet was all over the place. I feel wasn't the internet all over the place in 2001? Feel like it was because I was using it to do all my school reports.
Not in 2001.
But anyway, till I was 13 years old, I thought I was the only gay person in this whole world. Okay, and you know how scary that is. You know how scary it is when you wake up and all your friends are talking about having crushes on girls, or all the girls are talking about having crushes on boys, and I'm like, wait a minute, is something wrong with me? Right? I was 13 years old. Okay, now the 13-year-old kids that I know today talk about things that I would not talk about till I was 31. Right? And I think that is where we're talking about why it's easier. We're not saying that it's easier because suddenly everybody is like, oh, you're gay, so you're my friend. Oh, we are not going to ridicule you. We're not going to put you through shame, slander, so many different things that are happening. But the kids today are a lot more equipped to deal with things because they're also aware. And the awareness comes from comes from privilege, comes from logistics, comes from there's so much information out there, right? Being gay is not easy, but I feel like at some point, and at a very, very minuscule point, 0.00001, and this is my own personal opinion, I feel like accepting yourself is becoming easier.
Aniruddha, where did you grow up, Bombay?
I grew up in Bombay, which is where my privilege starts.
In 2001, you hadn't heard of...
which is why I said I was not bright growing up.
Of Vakola, Vakola is where the Humsafar Trust...
I was 13 years old, sir.
I'm sorry, Raj. People, I'm telling you, the exposure wasn't there.
Bombay Dost was available in...
Bombay Dost wasn't available...
In the bookstores. You could get it in bookstores.
But I don't
South
think
Bombay,
so.
you could get it in the bookstores.
So again, South Bombay, you said that.
You even saw copies on the pavement.
We didn't go and ask for Bombay Dost. It was a matter of shame. Why don't you get that?
But did you know that it was there?
It was there, yes. We were aware. It was instilled in us as a matter of shame. Growing up gay is not as easy to go into a bookstore and ask for Bombay Dost.
That's the same now. See what
I don't think so. I think today...
But see what Raga said. She said she can't introduce her partner anymore.
Yeah, but so aren't you... So when you say 377 repealing and you keep bringing back, today it's been a year since it's been repealed.
The judiciary repealed it,
yes.
not the government.
Okay, not
Mr.
the government.
Shashi Tharoor was here. I wish he came for this. His private member bill was thrown out. Right, twice.
Yes,
the government is still not
I agree with you, but if the judiciary has repealed it, it has had some impact.
Against the wishes of the government, so you'll never know what the government does tomorrow.
Yeah, fair, that fear is always there, but then does that mean we stop living in that fear?
But I'm just let me just sort of again intervene and say something here, which is, I just wonder if, and Raga, this is also a little bit to go back to your school admission form story and the bank loan story a little bit. I wonder if, do you think, and this is a genuine question, do you think the formation of or embrace of specific identities militates in some way against the formation of solidarities? So for instance, many millions of people in this country will be exactly in that same position depending on your caste background or class background. many people are in the same position despite the repealing of or reading down of 377. For instance, the government brings back a homophobic bias in the surrogacy bill, which says that you have to be a heterosexual couple to indulge in this. So by sort of focusing just on one thing, are we losing something that the right-wing government actually wants us to lose? Which is a sense of connection across borders, which is a sense of solidarities in which we fight against oppressions rather than against my oppression. So what, and this is a genuine open-ended question, like are we living at a point today, which is why I said that brings me to the second half of the title, are we living at a point today where we are being encouraged to fight for myself rather than ourselves, more broadly defined? And is that in fact part of a right-wing agenda? So, anybody?
May I?
Please.
See, I think the stories always start with us. Yeah, so if we don't start the narrative, if I don't stand up, and this is the reason I actually came out openly in my book. I haven't been out, as in I don't talk about it, right? So the narrative, and I realized one day it was a moment of epiphany for me, and I thought to myself, if I don't do it now, if I don't start, I don't know how much impact I can leave, and whether there are other stories to be told, right? There are many stories to be told. So when you say what you just said, right? When things happen for me and with me is when I suddenly realize, wow, this is actually a problem. This probably an issue, and then you start that narrative, or you don't talk about it. So when you choose to talk about it and we choose to do something about it, that is when the others who are facing a similar issue will join hands with you, and that is how change happens. So you're right in saying that is it our problem, do we talk about my problem, and then it becomes other people's problem? But I think the change has to start with one narrative at a time. That's how you change the story.
Madhavi and others, I do feel that sexual minorities are isolated. Coalitions have never happened. May I draw your attention to a lesbian anthology called Facing the Mirror. Have you heard of it? Edited by Ashwini Sukthankar. It opens on the very first page. She talks about how fire, which you mentioned, which was, the Shiv Sena wanted it banned. And then there were counter-protests by women's groups, protesting against what the Shiv Sena did, vandalizing cinemas and so on. Now, she says that there were lesbian groups who went to those protests with only one placard or banner of theirs saying out and proud. They were instantly told by the media and maybe by some mainstream women's groups that they were hijacking the protest, that Fire was not a lesbian film per se. Deepa Mehta, the director, was also quoted as saying it's not a lesbian film per se. They brought in the idea of situational lesbianism and so on. So, where is the bonding? I think that sexual minorities, because of the very thing that we represent, which is seen as not moral, unlike caste or gender or the other identity categories, we are isolated, and we will continue to be so. Therefore, the fight, either you have an approach where you are in your ivory tower and you don't see the world around you.
Speak into the mic.
Yeah, so you're in an ivory tower, you don't see the world around you, right? Or you choose to come down, be at the grassroots and call a spade, which is my approach. And when I do that, I can't, as I said, we all are privileged. Vivek, Aniruddha, and we are all, we may belong to different generations. I would say that, I was born when? 1955, do the math. And for me to say at that time that it was, I had no, what you said, that you didn't have a problem with your family. I didn't have a problem with my folks either. So I must have been in my teens in the 1960s and 70s. I still didn't have a problem. But I can't just be thinking of these things merely in relation to myself. When I look around, I see Aligarh, I see look at trans people. There are only 2 Hijra autobiographies, Lakshmi's and Revati's. I happen to be the co-translator of Lakshmi's. You see what trans people, the Hijra on the street, you talk to them. I just finished reviewing Nandini Krishnan's book on trans masculinity. look at what trans men are facing everywhere. So, what about the totality? How can we just sit here and say, well, I'm privileged and nothing has happened to me? I don't think that that's what this panel is really about.
I literally have nothing to say.
But I don't think we are saying that just because we are privileged and nothing has happened to us, that it won't happen, or there is no larger narrative. We are not even saying that. We are completely. I mean, I completely agree with you that there needs to be solidarity. But I also believe that solidarity comes from personal experiences and it binds people. It's about sharing of these experiences and talking about how it has differed from generation to generation and class to class. Yes, completely. And the various brackets that we are thrown into and expected to follow it. I mean, I think that also needs to be somewhat broken at some level. But again, we are so caught up in owning our identity, which is also there. So there's a total, there's this there's a tussle completely. And then I won't deny, you get taken in by the personal so much that you forget the larger narrative.
Yeah, the political.
Yes, you do. And when you realize it, and then you mull over it, and then you slowly try and figure the pieces. But yes, I admit that we are only looking inward. It's never outward.
Yeah, and maybe sort of just to bring in the last word of our title, which is Being Gay in Right-Wing India. And a lot of, certainly a lot of my work has been about sexuality or desire in India. And for me, what I find interesting / problematic is that we seem to be working in 2019 with an almost exclusively Western vocabulary. The idea of being gay is itself an extremely Western idea. And of course, I think we can all have narratives about how homophobia works, perhaps, in India today. But I think we also seem to be forgetting that long before the West ever discovered what it was to be gay, Indians were gay, right? And long before the West ever discovered what it meant to come out or to know yourself or to act on your desires, we did that. And so I just wonder, and again, this is an open question because it actually makes me, depending on my mood, sad, surprised, angry. I just wonder why we are so exclusively enthralled to a Western vocabulary. Like, why do we talk about, for instance, even though, why do we talk, I mean, and that's a gorgeous painting, and I thank you so much to the painter who did it. Geeta was wonderful. But why do we talk in terms of Stonewall? Why are we talking in terms of coming out of the closet? Why are we talking in terms of pride? Right? And I can understand the idea of pride in a context where there has been nothing but shame, which is very much a biblical context. But we have contexts that are much bigger, broader, deeper, wider than that. And our shame context is maybe 200 years old, which is not to say it's not important, and certainly it's the most recent, so maybe it might feel most pressing. But I just wonder about language. Maybe because I'm a professor of English, that's what interests me. And I'm just curious to hear about our use of vocabulary itself. How do we have alternative vocabularies? How do we talk about ourselves in India today?
Madhavi, now I think the support system has at least they're trying to solve that problem. For example, here in Pune, I wish he were here, Bindu Madhav Khire, many years ago, more than 10 years ago, started what he calls the Samapathik Trust, okay? And he's working with non-English speaking homosexual, terms like Koti, you were saying gay, and queer, I agree, and Stonewall. Stonewall, because that becomes a sort of symbolic starting point. That's all. It's not that we are selling out.
Symbolic Western starting point.
Yeah, Western starting point, but that's where it started. Because before Stonewall,
What's the it?
What?
What's the it? Because
the revolution. Before that, this was 1969. Before that, you had Nazi Germany, and even in America,
I know, but sort of 1,000 years
That way
before
even-
that we had Sufi poetry.
Yeah, we did, but
And 1,000 years
1860...
before that we had the Kama Sutra.
That's true, that's true. But as you said, the amnesia was so
Yeah.
intense that
Yeah.
we've lost our links with the pre-colonial past.
Right.
And for a lot of us, even when you invoke 377 in a way, you're starting with 1860,
Exactly,
isn't it?
yeah, yeah.
So that's why Stonewall, no other reason.
Yeah.
But, well, having said that, so Koti,
Yeah.
Panthi, the words, in case there may be people, how does someone who doesn't know English
Exactly.
refer to his sexuality if he's homosexual? But there is the word samlaingik now, which is being used, right? The word sakhi, among women, which is also, so these words are being reinvented. Some of them already existed, some of them did not. But there is an attempt. In Bangalore, Sangama, the
Yeah.
support group, Manohar Elavati runs it, and he faced the same issues of language. I think they're trying to, even the Hamsafar Trust, I don't know whether you know that in Bombay, Gay Bombay and the Hamsafar Trust split on exactly for this reason, that they started out as one group, but then the Gay Bombay guys thought that this was, we wanted everything to be in English. And if you look at them now, if you look at their profile, Hamsafar Trust is mainly non-English speaking, Kotis, trans people, trans men, Hijras, whereas Gay Bombay tends to be the more upper class elite. So I think that is being addressed. It's not as if it's not addressed at all. Maybe there's a lot more to be done, but it is being addressed.
So growing up, or even as I normally hear people, the use of gay or homosexual in Hindi, when I hear to me it's very, very jarring. They say gudwa, meetha. Somehow the tone in which it is said is so rather on the offensive that I don't know how to react. I mean, should we react with anger? Should we react with assertiveness? Should we own that also now? So I don't know. I'm a little lost where this language dynamics is concerned.
That's
because
there in English as well. What is faggot?
Faggot, yes.
What is pansy?
So then again, like I said,
in
but
all
we have
languages there are swear words and
true.
there's the
I
abusive-
agree, but there are no alternatives then for me to identify with when it's in Hindi. Like what Semlangik
Well,
is
you
one.
just say my samlaingik who?
Exactly. But I don't know. I mean, it's just gay is easier.
Or you say Koti.
That's all.
I think that Koti is a very indigenous identity because Kotis are not trans people. They tend to be men who are, let's say, somewhat feminine and feminized, who are, who are passive in the sex act and so on. And the term that
Again,
they
so does it
use
occur
is
from
Koti.
orientation? Does it occur from your role
Right.
in bed?
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
No,
So,
possibly
I'm
for
just
Kotis.
asking.
Possibly
I
for
am
Kotis
not
it does.
aware.
Because the opposite
So-
of Koti is seen as Panthi. Koti will say, ye mera Panthi hai.
Huh.
So I
So
think
again,
it needs a
you're
little-
bringing the concept of husband and wife, or man and
No,
woman.
I'm not- I don't
know.
say
No,
agree
I'm
with
just
you.
asking, Raj. I'm just asking. Yeah.
Possibly, but the vocabulary exists. This
Sure,
was
sure,
Madhavi's
of course.
question.
What if we?
See, this Lit Fest is in English, and unfortunately,
Of
all
course.
the 150 Lit Fests in India are in
Are in
English.
English,
But if
yes.
it were in Hindi or Marathi,
I agree.
we
yeah.
would be using.
So I would
But
be
you know,
more
we don't
curious
even-
to know in our other languages what
I mean,
it is.
I think that
you
is
know.
that is one way of approaching it, which is what are the words in other languages, and I think that's a very useful and productive way. And I'm not sure I have answers to that either. Like you, I also have questions, but I also mean languages in the broader narrative sense. Which is not just in terms of vocabulary, but in terms of stories. Because I think Raga is absolutely right that we need stories. So, for instance, if you go back to the Kama Sutra, the idea of anal sex exists only within heterosexuality. And so we don't even know that. We didn't even know that because we're presuming, of course, as good post-colonial, not so post-colonial
Yeah, of course.
refugees.
It just comes from there,
It comes-
right?
Exactly. And so I just want to check, Ankita, how much time do we have left? Because 15 minutes, so I'd like to open it, but let Raga
Just respond to
speak
that
quickly and
previous
then.
thing about
Yeah.
languages, right?
Yeah.
So for me, this is where I have a big issue.
Yeah.
Why do we need to define and name everything? Is there a necessity? And I'm not saying it is right or wrong. I question this myself. You know, when I first, met a friend of mine in the US many years ago, and I was at the dinner table and I was sharing the story with you, and I said to them, and I said, my love preference is a woman. I said women actually at that time, but it's a woman. And I said my love preference is a woman. And the father was sitting at the other end of the table, my friend's dad, and he instantly, within a second, responded, "How do you guys do it?" And I was shocked, and I said, "Do what?" And he said, "No, do it." And obviously he was referring to something which he couldn't fathom in his head. Voyeurism, and also the word gay, these labels that we have, faggots, and unfortunately all these have such definitions attached to it, and they're not always positive.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, those kind of things don't work. Why can't we just say love preference? Why do we have to say sexual preference, for instance? Because sexual preference, instantly we think about sex. So, but do we even need to have a language? Can we just not be?
Okay, which is a very good question, since the first word of our title is being, right? And that's precisely what I started with. But I think we have generated plenty of fodder for thought and conversation. So let me throw it open to you about questions about anything we've talked about, or questions about things we have not touched upon. Please feel free. And if you could just raise your hand, and you'll get a mic, and if you could just introduce yourselves, and we'll take it from there. And to whom your directing your question to.
Yeah, I'm Geeta Vishwanath.
Yeah.
My question is actually to all the panelists. Anyone can choose to answer. The topic of the title, you had captioned it as being gay in right-wing India. But somehow the discussion, I did not get the right-wing India part of it. I don't think anybody really spoke about what it really means to be gay in right-wing India, and how it was, or how it is different from being gay in non-right-wing India.
But I think Raj talked about it, but if you'd like to talk some more.
Well, I
Raj,
can
please.
talk as much as you want about it. Right-wing India, of course, is where dissent is not tolerated. And in a way, we are all dissenters because we don't conform to the sexual norm. So we are all dissenters. And we are in right-wing India, right? Who's ruling us? And what are the other things that you see happening around you? You know that very well. I don't have to rub that in.
No, he said in 2009 when the Delhi High Court read it down, that was not right-wing India. But actually in 2013, when the Supreme Court overturned the Delhi High Court ruling, we were on the cusp of it.
I said that in 2009, in spite of the Delhi High Court reading down 377, it still didn't come to the professor's rescue. Now that was not the present regime, but it was still India. So it was not as if, I'm not saying that India was way different from this India, but I'm saying that now, and let me say, okay, let me specify this, Madhavi, if you give me a minute, that I am not at all comfortable with the idea that this, whatever decriminalization happened last year, was a judicial and not a legislative decision, right? And I have cited, I've got this book, Criminal Love, Queer Theory, Culture and Politics in India, and I've cited that within the present ruling party, I mentioned Mr. Shashi Tharoor, but he is not from the BJP, but Mr. Arun Jaitley very much wanted the 377 issue to be settled. He was challenged by his colleague, Mr. Subramaniam Swamy, who actually said on television, I heard this, that I dare Mr. Jaitley to say this at a party meeting. This is his own view and it doesn't represent the BJP's official view. And then, even after the decriminalization, this same man goes on TV and says, so what? This is a 5-judge constitutional bench. Tomorrow we can have a 7-judge constitutional bench that again goes back to the earlier, ruling. Now that might not be easy, but look at the thinking that goes into it. Also, the judge, right, said that we owe the LGBT community an apology. Well, was that apology, did it come our way? Were we congratulated? Did they apologize? Nothing of the sort. So when you say right-wing India, it's these things. When the decriminalization happened, I tweeted the next day and I said, we've got to be vigilant. We can't become complacent. This is what happened in 2009. People became complacent. There are people who came out in 2009 not anticipating that in 2013 the Supreme Court could overturn the Delhi High Court ruling, and then after that they suddenly felt very vulnerable because coming out of the closet is a one-way process. You can't go back into the closet. So there's all these things, Geeta, that one has at the back of one's head.
Right. Did anyone else want to add anything to that? No? Okay. Yes. Over there. Yeah.
Hello. I just wanted to point to the fact out that right-wingism and left-wingism is not only limited to the government that rules us, but it's an ideology. Right-wing, left-wing, it coexists. So there's always going to be a right-wing that will oppose you. I have friends. My best friend came out to me a year ago. She can't tell her parents because at some point right wing means conservative, the conservative side of a country or any place. If I were to say something to my parents, I'm straight, but if so, then I wouldn't be able to. Another friend of mine, I'm a Muslim. I'm an atheist. My parents are Muslim, but I'm sorry for all the clarifications. But another one of my friend is also a Muslim, and in Islam, homosexuality has very little space. No space, in fact, at all. He cannot come out to his parents. So, in a way, isn't that right wing, which independent of the government that is ruling us, a right wing is always there to oppose us, to oppose you.
I just want to, please, Aniruddha will respond.
Oh my God, I can't.
Oh, I thought, no, I just want to say by way of clarification that there is no organized religion in the world that tolerates homosexuality. So it's not just Islam. And I think we need to be very careful, given the reigning atmosphere of Islamophobia, to say in Islam there is no space. There is no space in Judaism. There is no space in Christianity either. So we need to be aware of that. Yeah, but you should know. But we should know. We should know about this. Would any of you? Yeah, please.
I so agree with you because I think the right-wing India starts at home. We have that at home, right? To date, like I said, I haven't even come out to my own siblings, and I have older siblings. So they exist, and they exist in our society. So what is this right-wing India? And that's one of the conversations that we wanted to have about, is the title right for us? Because it is not about India or the government or the legislative. It's about each one of us. Are we right-wing India or not? Is the question we should ask ourselves.
Yeah, you're right. Of course, the right wing is not just the government, and it's also its people, its citizens, but the government can't be wished away. They claim that how many seats do they win in the Lok Sabha, so they think that the whole nation is with them in terms of their way of thinking, right? So I think that certainly impacts the way people think, who's in charge, what ideology do they uphold, and that certainly influences people on an everyday basis. So of course, when the decriminalization happened, the next thing was a lot of journalists did interviews and so on, and they said, even Mirror now had this program with Faye D'Souza, and the title was, "Has Anything Changed?" And I think that what that implied is that mindsets take a long time to change. Even if the law changes, mindsets take a long time to change. So that's what you're talking about, of course. But I think that people do look up to their government, to their leaders, and if you get this vibe from the leaders that yes, we owe them an apology and it's all right, I think that certainly helps in changing the thinking of people, So everybody is right-wing, yes, and conservative, but maybe that will change a little bit, right?
Other questions? Yes.
Hi, my name is Nupur, and I want to talk about, I would like you to talk about something that Raj touched upon. About that I've heard that sufferings bring together people. Right, so this is something I've heard from some book or what, but as Raj talks about in his Madam Give Me My Sex also, about how sexual minority nahi, but marginalized, like, okay, so sexually marginalized people are also victims of other marginalized crowds. Right, so be it caste or gender, like you spoke about fire and the issue about it. So I would like you to, talk about something that, about some experience maybe. Is it true in the contemporary in the sense like after the verdict or like after section 377 got dissolved and everything? I would like you to, talk about that some more. Raj gave his opinion, but I would like others also to add on to it.
But I think the multiple marginalizations still happen every single day in their own way. I mean, maybe sometimes I've just become so thick-skinned that it doesn't get to me. Or maybe because, like, I wouldn't even say because of privilege, because it's just the way it is so vile and vicious that you don't even want to acknowledge it most of the time. So I don't know if that's the right way to go about it, but I think that also it's just everyday living, right? I mean, like there was a time a cousin makes an inappropriate remark at a family event, and though he's aware since 18 years when I came out that that it's not appropriate to even do that, but in these small ways, and it still is a comment on who you are and what you are, and that is something that will take a lot of time, like Raj said, for that mindset. And while my mother now after 18 years, she's finally come around and she's like, oh, so you're going to get married, so will that ever happen, will there be a husband, and so on and so forth. She has that conversations today. I think it has taken her a lot of time to get to that stage. Like my aunt once told me that, oh, I wish you were lesbian, because what two women can do when it comes to sex. So for her, it was basically intercourse or anal, and she had that idea in her head. So that was. So again, that I maybe laughed at that time, but I didn't know how to react really. Like, should I be offended, and why should I be offended, and what is the reason? So there's so many things. So.
Madhavi, I have a minute. After you.
So, Nupur, I think that's a fantastic comment you made. Now, see, I think there are a lot of said things and unsaid things. Marginalization is not just what you see, what you experience, or what people say to you on your face. It is something that sometimes is unsaid. And I'll give you an example. So, and you only go through this when you come out to people, or when people think that you have certain sexual orientation. They don't talk to you about it, but they do certain things around you that make you feel that. Right? I was in New Zealand, and I'm talking about New Zealand, very liberal country, in a very, very senior position in an advertising agency there, and I was told that I was going to be made the director of the company, and everybody knew, it was public knowledge, and we were very excited about it. And then the situation changed, and I decided that I was not going to be married anymore, and there was a whole drama around it that happens as you make those decisions. And my directors then got to know about it. And you could just see the subtle change from being the star of the organization and a star in a lot of places in New Zealand. Suddenly, I was not the star anymore. My capabilities were the same. My knowledge and networks were the same. I was the same person. But they had changed. I hadn't changed. So you experience these things. And those are the ways that you know that you're marginalized. Nobody will say it on your face. I have been spat at, by the way. In India, someone has actually come to my face and spat on me. And then who spits on people? And these things happen, and you have to deal with it. And my own mother And there's a story around it. When she got to know I was, of a certain orientation, my mother stood one night, was putting my little babies to bed with a knife over my head. And she said, I would rather you die than live this life. I don't want to know you anymore. So these are things that you experience, and this is an everyday thing that you said. And how do you deal with it, and what do you say about it? You just learn from it, and you believe that one story at a time, things will change.
Raj, the last word. I think we have about a couple of minutes to go. That's it, right?
Yeah, as
We're
an academic, it's not just about me, but let me speak in a little more general terms. Way back in the 1980s, in America, you'll find, Eve Sedgwick talks about this, that in the post-HIV and AIDS world of America, women, feminists, mainstream heterosexual feminists distance themselves from lesbians, right? So this is one kind of marginalization within marginalization. She says that before AIDS, she said we had this slogan, feminism is the theory, lesbianism is the practice. But after AIDS that changed, and the lesbians were and this might explain why when Fire was released and lesbians went to the protest marches, they were told to get out. The other thing is, if you take LGBTQIA as a formulation, look at what the trans people are saying today. The trans people definitely feel marginalized within the LGBT community. Look at the quarrel between, say, someone like Ashok Rao Kavi and Lakshmi. They never get on, They never get on because of this. Kavi represents, gayness, the gay man, and Lakshmi is the hijra, and they can't see. Trans people have had several dissertations of this kind that have come to me, where you talk about trans marginalization. Now, within the trans community, trans men are saying that they are worse off than trans women, because trans women still have a support system, right? That trans men are completely invisibilized. So there's all that, there's so much to be dealt with that there's a long way to go.
I think Aniruddha just has one thing to say, and then we're done.
The idea is the point of the conversation as being gay in right-wing India, right? And my only takeaway from here was that, why is it gay? Right? Why is it not LGBTQIA? And secondly, if in case we're talking about LGBTQIA, this panel has predominantly 3 cis gay men, right? So then, how can we even talk about the spectrum when the panel itself does not have enough representation? Right? Honestly speaking, I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm writing a dating book for queer men, right? My political knowledge is nil. It's next to knowing something about petroleum, right? So basically, if in case there are so few queer voices in the country that they have to scoop from the 10 of us, and that is what I think being gay in right-wing India is, right? Because it is that difficult to find those many voices from the community that we have to get any voice that you can find, including mine. Okay, and I feel like this is the only contributing statement that I can make in this entire conversation, because I don't have the intellectual capacity to be a part of any other conversation that happened in the last hour. And I have never felt so stupid in my life. Okay, and my mother makes me feel stupid on a daily basis. Wow, this was amazing.
And on that note, we will send a recording of this to your mother. And thank you all very much for being here, and thank you all for being on.